Hey guys, welcome back to this channel. Guys, if you're new here, my name is Flower Johnson and I sometimes go by Canadian Paco. So whichever way you know me, this is me again. So guys, I'll be starting off a new job series about some of the lucrative and good jobs that you can get abroad, in Canada, US, or when you're out of the country that will really earn you good money, as well as I'll be telling you how you can apply for these jobs. And well, in today's series we'll be focusing on a particular job, and we'll be focusing on a policy analyst. I know a lot of people have been asking me, oh, like, I want to be a policy analyst, can you help me with my not resume though, or can you help me with my resume actually, or can you help me, do something or do that. But guys, I have a guest today in the building. I have Larry. Yeah, Larry is a certified policy analyst with the British Columbia Public Service government in Canada. So Larry has, I'm going to give Larry, some time to talk about his, what he does as a policy analyst, and also a few things you need to take home if you're looking at becoming a policy analyst. And some of the tips we'll be giving you today, you can also use it if you're trying to apply for another type of job, especially outside the country, outside like in Canada, US, wherever you are. You can use the same resume advice or preparing for an interview advice for your job application. So, guys, I'm just going to switch over to Larry. Larry, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Flo.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to the first question, which is, so tell us about what a policy analyst is, and like people just hear policy analyst, what is it and what do they really do?
Um, Thank you. That's an interesting question, and thank you for having me. It's a privilege to come and share in your channel. So I like to keep things simple because as a policy analyst as well, we're very, very coincides in how we communicate and how we write. So I'll break it down just for the viewer so that you understand what policy analysts do. So we have to understand policy in itself, first of all. So policy can be as simple as saying it's a law, it's a guideline, it's a principle, it's a course of action that could be given to anybody by any entity. But most times, policy analysis is usually like associated with the government. That's why most policy analysts you see would be in the government. But policies can range from laws, simple rules, simple guidelines. So organizations could have policy analysts as well, right?
Okay.
So it's just not the government. But now that we know what the policy is, we now have to understand what the policy analyst does. So,
yeah, sorry to cut you short. That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about policy, and I'm thinking of, okay, do I have to be like a lawyer to be like a policy analyst? So what exactly do you do in the job as a policy analyst?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So policy analysts are in the back end, basically. So the end goal is a policy. But what do we have to do to make sure that this policy becomes fulfilled, becomes a fruition? That's what policy analyst does. So what we do is, most times, you analyze events, you analyze existing policies. Sometimes it could be new policies where you have to come up with something that the government has to do. But to come up with that means you have to first seek out information. That in line goes into like your research skills. So you have to like be able to find information. How do you find information? You have to be able to research that information. So you are helping the government to make policy decisions as a policy analyst. So it's in three phases. Most times, we all know now that the end goal is having a policy.
Yeah.
Right? But what comes into having that policy? First of all, as a policy analyst, you look for information. When you get that information, you analyze that information. So information seeking, analyzing the information that you've received or you found. When you analyze information, you're analyzing information because you want to come to a conclusion using that information.
Okay.
Then that goes into making a decision, right? But because as a policy analyst, you can't make that decision. You can only suggest those decisions. So based on the findings you've done, based on the analysis you've done, you come up with, oh, I've analyzed this. This is the options that we can go with.
Like a recommendation.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you take that to the appropriate, it could be the minister, if it's a government, it could be your direct supervisor, it could be an executive director, whoever is in charge of making that decision.
Wow.
So you are basically helping them to make that decision. So once that decision is made and they follow whatever guidelines you've given them, it then becomes a policy. Then after that, after it becomes a policy, then there's the job of implementing the policy. So it comes back to you. So you've analyzed this information, you've said this is what you should do. The minister or whoever should make the decision have made that decision. They then come back and say, okay, now implement this policy. So implementing the policy is another ballgame in itself.
Wow.
It depends on the kind of policy you're working on.
Okay.
Right? So implementing a policy could be, and that's why as a policy analyst, you have to be very dynamic in your skills. To implement now, you came up with this policy. You have to convince people that this policy makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah. Okay.
Right? You have to explain this policy to people in as simple as terms as possible, because then you're trying to roll out this policy. You have to explain it to them. Then that brings you into having presentation skills, so that you can explain that policy, right?
Yeah.
And then brings you to having writing skills. When you write that policy, people can read it and understand that policy.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna like you're already talking about the skills you need.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
But can I become a policy analyst with no experience? Or what are the basic things I would need just to, just get started in that particular career path?
So basically, the skills you would need,
yeah,
like just to keep your questions simple, you said we don't have any experience. So if you get to like the implementation stage, you obviously have to have skills like presentation skills, writing skills, then analytical skills where you can analyze the policies, you can analyze whatever options you have, and then stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement has to do it depends on the stakeholders you are engaging with. So communication skills comes into question as well.
Okay.
So the reason why policy analysis is very good is because being a policy analyst, you can branch into several fields after you gain your experience as a policy analyst.
Yeah, like I don't have an experience. I am new to, let's say, Canada, and I really want to become a policy analyst like you. I have, maybe like a diploma or something in business. So how do I get there? I don't have any experience. Like, what should I be working towards?
Yeah. So the thing about, I'll talk based on Canada, like the work environment we work in. It might be different in other economical situations, Nigeria or thereabout.
Yeah.
In Canada, there's something called relevant experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be acquired during work experience, right? So if you can convince whoever interviewer you're talking to that you have the relevant experience, which are out of the top of my head, writing skills, analytical skills, communication skills, presentation skills, research skills.
Yeah.
So what experience could you have gotten that would give you all those things? Probably your education. So like the example you gave now, if you have a business degree, they would assume that when you were doing your degree, you've had to do assignments, you've had to look for, you've had to do projects, you've had to work in a team, you've had to do all those things.
Yeah.
So you can convince them that you have the skill to be successful as a policy analyst.
Yeah, because I did all of that. I did the research in my project. I did the teamwork and stuff like that. Okay. So thank you for just touching on the skills for us. But I have a very curious question I want to ask you. And it is, so let's assume I am coming to, I'm going to use Canada because we are in Canada right now. I'm coming to Canada from Nigeria, and I used to be a banker in Nigeria. How do I use that experience to, just apply for a policy analyst role?
Most job descriptions, most policy analyst job descriptions have to do with you being able to specify that you've had relevant experiences. Experiences like research and analysis, writing, presentation skills, providing advice and recommendations to whoever. It could be the minister, it could be the government, it could be just your immediate boss. But like in the job descriptions, you most likely see providing advice and recommendations.
Yes.
Right? So what you have to do in that case is, as a banker, what part of your job kind of fits into that criteria? So as a banker, have you been part of a banking project that had to do with you looking for information, sourcing for information, providing recommendations to your boss, analyzing that information? Maybe you're trying to roll out a new program, for example, a new bank program, for example. So you can always make the case that even as a banker, you have the skills, because what's important here is like having the skills to be a successful policy analyst. But as a banker, have you done it before?
Yeah, I'm just thinking if I used to work as a teller, I can actually even maybe say that why I was working as a teller, because you're solving problems too, right? You're trying to solve problems of clients. You can use part of that experience as, you know, problem solving. And also, if I used to be a teller, you're also doing research in case there is an issue with a customer's file, right? That's more like research skills as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting how you can fit your experience into being a policy analyst and trying to apply for a role.
Exactly. And another thing that might help you, because like we defined policy at the beginning of the video, right?
Yeah.
It's a set of rules, set of guidelines, a course of action. For example, the COVID policy. So there was a point where you have to like isolate for a particular amount of days. It was first 14 days and become 10 days and all that. Yeah. So it was first 14 days meant that was the first policy that the government put out, that this is the recommended days. Then after some time, they said 10. What changed between 14 and 10? The policy had been reviewed by some people and then analyzed, and then based on information out there, we realized that 10 days is enough to still do the same work as 14 days. And that's why as a policy analyst, you keep reevaluating policies. So apart from bringing up new policies, you still give advice on existing policies as well. You keep making it better. Yeah. And then that's where relevant knowledge comes in play, because you have health policies, for example. COVID-19 policies are health policies. Yeah. You have, if it's the government, if you're working in the Ministry of Finance, you have financial policies, right? Yeah. If you're working in the Ministry of Children and Family, you have children and family policies. Yeah. So in your case, going back to your question, as a banker, does it make sense to work as a policy analyst in the Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Children and Family? You can you can convince them that you can work in the Ministry of Finance as a policy analyst because you've worked in a financial sector before, which is the banking industry. Yeah. Right? And those skills that you gain there could help you as a policy analyst in the Ministry of Finance, because you have these skills and as well you have the specific knowledge and expertise to be successful in that role. So that's why in your resume you have to show that apart from the skills that you generally have, you also have specific knowledge about that industry, right? Wow. Policy industry you're trying to get into.
We're just going to move on to the next question, which is more about how should your resume look like when you want to apply for the role of a policy analyst? Because I know that sometimes in some countries, some employers want you to specify your resume in a particular format or emphasize on some things in your resume. So we're going to be hearing from our guest here. I want to apply for a role of a policy analyst. How should I structure my resume?
Okay. I use a simple rule for any job I apply for, right? The rule is give them what they want, right? So if there's a job description that says we want you to have these skills, that skills, and these skills. We want to have, as a policy analyst, for example, we want you to have research skills. We want you to have writing concisely. We want you to have providing advice and recommendations to supervisors and all that.
Yeah.
Your resume has to specifically show that. You don't have to write it word for word, but it has to show that you have that skill. Because most times, more often than not, the first line of screening for your resume is done by a program, a system, right? And that system would obviously, it's programmed to identify keywords from the job descriptions. So if you don't add those keywords, then your resume is not going to the next level before someone sees it. Yeah. The only way you would get to the next level without having those keywords is if the first line of review was done by a human. Yeah. So if it's someone that does the review, you can say, oh, okay, this person might actually have the skills, right? Yeah. But a program would not know. The program is just programmed to identify keywords. If you don't put those keywords in your resume, you're not going to the next stage. So as a banker or as whatever career path you've been before you become a policy analyst, you have to make sure that whatever you've done before is shown in your resume and it fits the skills that you would obviously have to show as a policy analyst. So the resume is just give them what they want. Yeah. With regards to education, for like most times, with regards to education, it's very, very hard to work around that depending on what you do. Because if, for example, you studied
geology.
Yes. You studied geology.
Or geography.
Geography could still work if you're working as a policy analyst in the ministry of...
I studied English. Oh, it still works too.
Exactly, because writing skills, right? Yeah. So there are many education paths that would work for a policy analyst because they just feel like as far as you have the skills, you can do the job, basically.
I actually noticed, I was looking at some jobs online. I noticed that sometimes they say, even if you have your high school certificate, you can still apply for the job, especially in a place like Canada. Like whether you have high school, the only thing is they just require you to have more years of experience in that particular area. So guys, even if you have high school, if you have a diploma, if you have a degree or maybe PhD or whatever you have, if you are able to align the experience that you need that the job needs, it will definitely get you there. So I'm going to just switch to the next question. I just want to know, I know that sometimes when people are being asked, let's say they are going to the next stage after their resume, they are being asked for an interview. How do you think they should prepare or conduct themselves during the interview? So just more like before the interview, how to prepare for it, and during the interview, what are the things you need to know?
Okay, so I think for interviews, all the interviews I've done, I think one thing that usually stands out for me is you have to be able to walk your interviewers through a journey, which means it has to be told in a story. You have to highlight your skills in a past experience. So if they ask you any question, it has to be, thank you for asking me that question, but I've done this in the past, and what I did was, there was this project I had to do, I did this, did that, something happened along the line, I used my skill to figure it out, and then this was the result. Yeah. So you have to be able to walk them through the relevant experience through your past experience. Like most interviews, as simple as you have to go prepared with several scenarios in your head that you think, as a policy analyst now, for example, we've talked about, you have to be able to analyze information. You have to be able to research. Yeah. You have to be able to provide advice and recommendations. Yeah. You have to be able to write. So you have to go there with experiences that would showcase those skills. So basically, any experience you talk about has to showcase a policy analyst skills, because everybody there, all your interviewers are looking at, would you be able to do this job? Would you be able to perform well in this job? So your past experience has to convince them that you've done it before. So if you just go there and you start saying, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, how can you do it?
How?
You have to prove that you've done it before. Yeah. That is how we can believe that you can do it.
Yes, that actually takes me to the technique being used for interview, which is the STAR technique. Do you want to maybe throw some light on that? On how you use that particular technique? So I know the first one is a situation, the second one is a task, then the action, then the results.
Yeah.
So we can maybe just talk about an interview question and just see how you answer it. How about that?
Okay, sure.
Okay. Tell me about a time when you had to analyze or solve a difficult problem.
A difficult problem. So, as a policy analyst now, for example, what the interviewer is trying to see is what difficult problem have you solved before, and how did you solve them, and what skills did you use in solving them? Yeah. So, if I was going to answer that question, I could start by just saying, oh, okay, in my past experience on one of my job, I was working as so and so in this organization.
Yes.
Right? I was given a project to oversee. The project had to do with figuring out something for something.
Yeah.
Right? During the project, you obviously had to first figure out what you need to make this project successful. Do your research.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you do your research at the action. You talk about the situation, which is the project you're supposed to oversee. You do your research. You found information. You analyze the information. You're already showing them that you can do what policy analyst does, right?
Yeah.
You analyze the information. You found information, and then maybe while you're analyzing this, as maybe the project leader, you organize your tasks for your team members. So you've already shown to them that you have team spirit. You have a team spirit. You can work well in a team. So they're already saying that, oh, okay, it makes sense, because when you're working here, you have to work in a team as well. Yeah. But in the past, you've done it before. So you organize your tasks, you analyze it, you set the time, you set the deadline as well. So they already say that because they are looking for somebody who can keep the time, who can set out tasks and achieve them at the deadline. And you've shown them based on your experience that you've done it before. So that is you walking them through a story. And then maybe after you've analyzed them, you set the tasks, you guys, all your team members come, brainstorm, then you figure out the next action. Yeah. But then during the action, something happens.
There's a problem. Yeah.
Exactly. So you have to show that a problem happened. So maybe during the action, maybe part of your requirement was to meet with various stakeholders. And in this case, the stakeholders could be, if you're a banker, maybe someone from another bank, or it could even be board members, depending on where you've worked. If you're working in the government, stakeholders could be maybe indigenous people, could be a stakeholder, and you have to communicate and negotiate with them to reach a solution. So maybe during that engagement, there was conflict of interest. So then you have to solve the problem of conflict of interest. How do you do that? Maybe you have to look for more information. You have to look for a result that will make sure you have a win-win situation. So that's you analyzing. You've done everything that you need to do as a policy analyst, even if your past experience was not policy analysis, right?
Yeah.
But you've shown to them that you can do all this thing. And maybe after your conflict resolution, you're able to figure out a solution, and then at the end, whatever the project you're supposed to do, you did it at the deadline, and then you got a recommendation from the executives. It was a nice project. You're able to roll out the stuff in time and all those things. So you walk them through a journey, the situation, the time, the action, the result. You walk them through a journey of how you could solve problems if you were to face that kind of problem as a policy analyst. And as a policy analyst, there will be a lot of projects you have to handle, right? There will be a lot of things you have to do. And you showing them through your past experience that you've done it before. Your foot is already in the door. It doesn't mean that it's not, but you've done enough for them to give you the job, basically.
So, just tell us about, I want to become a policy analyst. If I have some certificate, does it give me an edge? Do I need some certificate? Just tell me about the certificate required.
Okay, I think the first and basic certificate you require is have a degree, a bachelor's degree, to say the least. Okay. Having higher degrees is a plus, right? It means if, for example, there are two of you going for that position, one has a BSc, one has a master's, same level of experience, they will obviously go for the master's because they believe you have a higher level of this thing. But the basic and minimum requirement is you have a BSc. But when it comes to certification, though, like when I was talking about things you do as a policy analyst, right?
Mm-hmm.
We understood that you have the implementation phase,
Yeah.
where you then have to carry out this policy.
Yeah.
How do you carry it out? Then it becomes a project for you, right?
Oh,
So when it
yeah.
becomes a project, you're gonna have to figure out what you need to make this project fulfill. Then you have to like do a project proposal and all those things. That's when, if in that case you have a project management certification, you have an edge, because as a policy analyst at some point you start to do project as well. So having a project management certification is a plus. You don't necessarily have to have it to become a policy analyst, but it's a plus, right?
Okay.
It sets you apart when
gives you that edge.
It gives you that edge as well. Implementation phase as well. When I know that me in my role as policy analyst, there are cases where even after you've managed the project, you've implemented this project, doing that project means that you have to some of them means you have to carry out services to the citizens, but you cannot do it yourself. It means organizations have to carry out those services on behalf of your or in my case, the government, right?
Okay.
So the government then have to contract out those services. So that's when you have contractors. That's when contract management comes into play.
Wow, you work with contractors as well.
Exactly. So as a policy analyst, you can become, in that role, you are becoming a procurement specialist. Because then you have to then exactly. So then you have to then look for which of the organizations among the thousands or among the millions of organizations in this province, in this country, can carry out these services for us. You have to then request for proposals. Okay, what can you do? This is our policy. This is what we are trying to do. What can you do? What skills do you have? What resources does your organization have that can fulfill this? That is when you start, based on whatever organization meets the criteria of your request for proposal, we then award the contract. And then contract management comes into play. You have to like get reports and all those things. Then analyzing report comes into play.
Wow.
So like there is that. So I was taking you through the journey of this is the end goal. But before that end goal, the policy, you then have to go through all these things. Then after the policy is formed, you then have to implement the policy. So there are some cases where, as a policy analyst, you might not be part of the implementation group. But me, I've been fortunate to be part of all the process, right?
Yeah.
So when I get to the implementation phase as well, I'm still part of the project team, analyzing team, and then implementation team, and then contract management team. So that's why, as a policy analyst, it's a very, very dynamic role.
That's good.
That after you're a very good policy analyst, you can become anything you want to be.
You can become a contract manager, or
you can become
a project manager. It's crazy.
You can become a business analyst. You can just go branch into different phase of careers. So I see policy analyst as a very, very good starting point. If you get there, if you've gotten all the skills you need, you can do anything.
Okay.
Basically.
So first of all, tell us what a briefing note is and how can you write one if you were told to write one in, as part of your assessments.
Okay, yeah. Just to put context into what you're saying is, in Canada, in BC Public Service, if you are applying for any role, most times you are supposed to do an assessment before the interview stage. That's different for private organizations.
Yeah.
So she's talking about if you are supposed to do an assessment before the interview stage. And most times, as a policy analyst, the assessment you're given is to write a briefing note. So let's talk about a briefing note. Yeah. As the word implies, briefing note, brief. So the most important part of briefing note is it has to be concise, right? So it has to be something that a minister takes and can read it in like 5 minutes, because it has to be as simple and as brief as possible. So briefing notes, based on my experience, there are two major briefing notes. Yeah. It could be for information or for decision. Like when we talked about policy analysts and what they do, we've already spoken about where they give advice and recommendations, right? Yeah. All this is done by written communications, and it's done through briefing notes. So most times, as a policy analyst, if you want to provide information to your supervisor or to the minister, if you work in the government, you have to write a briefing note. You have to brief them about that policy.
Yeah.
So if whatever you're doing is just for the information purposes, so there are some times where the minister is going for a meeting somewhere or has a conference somewhere, and you have to tell the minister about a new policy that just came out or an existing policy.
Yeah.
So that's just for information. So you have to explain that policy in as simple terms as possible, that the minister can just, once they get the question, they can look at it and understand what you're saying and be able to answer the question.
Okay.
So as concisely as possible. Then the one for decision, there's more work put into that, because you're writing this note because whoever is going to read this note has to make a decision based on whatever you've written in that note. So first of all, you have to understand that if you're writing a briefing note, you have to ask your question that what's the end goal, right? Who am I writing this note for? And most times in the government, for example, or in anywhere, I think there's usually a format for briefing notes.
Okay.
There's usually a format for briefing. They'll give you a template that you have to follow to write a briefing note. You obviously they'll tell you for who you're writing it to. You have the title of the briefing note. You have key points in the maybe first section. You have discussion, and then you have options if you're writing it for decision. So when it comes to the key point, you have to ask a question like, why has the note been requested? Who am I writing it for? Is it for decision? Is it for information? What is the purpose of writing this note? Given the context and scenario, what exactly does the minister really need to know, right? So once you've written all that, you have to look at, have I identified the various factors that I need for this note? It starts with the background.
Okay.
The background has to be, most times I write my briefing notes usually like in points. So most times the background should be just a brief background of whatever you're talking about. If they say you should talk about, give a decision about, for example, let's walk through a briefing note, give you a decision about let's say relevant cases, COVID. Let's just say, what should we suggest for the number of isolation days based on the current COVID climate?
Yeah.
Right? So you have to, you cannot just jump into saying, oh, I recommend that, let's do 2 days, blah, blah, blah. You have to talk about COVID. Okay, COVID-19 is so thing. It was a pandemic, it happened in so year, it affected so people and stuff like that. So far.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's gonna be on your mic, so but go ahead.
So I just
no, just keep on.
Alright. So COVID affected so people. It has a lot of people are marginalized through COVID. So
that forms the
how many people have been affected? So just figures. So far, this have affected, that have been affected. So discussion. You're giving a background, general overview of what COVID means. Discussion has to do with what we are talking about. What are we asking about? Okay, how has the COVID rate been in BC, for example? So BC has been blah blah blah. So discussion is more like, background is like general overview. Discussion is specific discussion. So it's specific to whatever they're asking you, whatever your title is. So discussion is more like you're bringing it down. So COVID has affected so in BC.
Like you're analyzing.
Exactly. So discussion, you're kind of like streamlining the view.
Yeah.
This, background was general, discussion is streamlining the view.
Okay.
And then based on all what you've discussed, what are the options you are proposing? Most times you have 2 or 3 options.
Okay.
Option 1 is usually maintaining status quo.
Yeah.
That
I know that one.
Yeah. That is like,
it should always be there.
Yeah, I've said all this, but I think we should maintain status quo. But the important thing about your options is not the option in itself. It's why, it's the effect of the options.
Okay.
So how logical is your argument? So if you say maintain status quo, okay, why should I? So you can obviously most times you are going for option 2. So you are trying to say something that about why you shouldn't maintain status quo. So we shouldn't maintain status quo because so far so thing has not worked. If you continue this way, it will end up being this.
Okay.
Option 2, let us do this, and that.
Yeah.
And then you now say, okay, we should do this because this is going to happen, this is going to happen. But another tricky thing in that is that it depends on whatever topic you're working on. There are some options that has cost implications.
Oh.
So you should be able to, you cannot just give options and not look at the cost implications, right? So if I'm a minister and I look at it and say, oh, this guy's proposing this option. Okay, yes, we should do that, but how much will it cost us? How many people will be affected? So you have to like put numbers. So you have to be convincing. So the briefing note is about how convincing you are for decision. So if you are proposing this option, that option you have to spend time thinking, and that's why critical thinking is important as a policy analyst, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to think of this option I'm proposing, what's the cost implication? If I'm saying that, for example, COVID isolation days should not be 10 days anymore, it should be 5 days. Look, what are the implications? Okay, you're saying that if it's 5 days, is there data that supports that the virus would not be in the person's body after 5 days?
Yeah.
You have to like source, okay, there's a data now. There are data. How many people have you seen that are isolated for 5 days and they are still fine? You have to say that, okay, they are still fine, blah, blah, blah. So, like, because if they are just at home for 5 days and they can start working back in the 6th day, the economy will be affected positively, which means so amounts would have been generated in 5 years and stuff like that. So you're making an argument for why this option is what you should go with.
All in your briefing notes.
Exactly, all in your briefing note. But like I said, as brief as possible. But the trick about briefing note is you can have appendix, right?
Okay.
Where you can add whatever amount of information you want to add.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
So if you've done your research, a vast research, and you have more numbers to show, put it in the table, put it in appendix, and just refer to it and say more information in the appendix, right?
Oh.
But your briefing note, exact briefing note, has to be brief.
Okay.
Briefing note coincides. I think the most important thing is coincides and the amount of information that you put.
I think just to summarize it, the first thing is have your topic there, to address it to wherever you're trying to write the briefing note to, have your background, the discussion, the options, and your recommendation. Because without the option, you need to recommend something. Then you can add appendix if you have more data to back up and maybe refer to your appendix from the discussion or whichever part of it. Okay, that's a really detailed one. I think with this one, like anybody should be able to write a briefing notes.
Hopefully.
Okay, so I think we've come to the end of this section. I'm just gonna ask you, like, what advice you have for our viewers out there. You know, people are trying to get a job, people are trying to switch career, people are trying to work on their resume, work on their interview skills. Like, generally, what advice do you want to throw out to them?
I think my advice is seek help.
Ooh.
It's as simple as this video is a form of help, right? So seeking help doesn't have to be somebody. If you don't have anybody around you, watch videos, take courses that would improve your writing skills. Before I became a policy analyst, I took several courses. I took courses on how to write a briefing note.
Wow.
Like, I took several courses on I read a book on how to write a briefing note. I went to some websites, all those courses website, like Udemy, for example. I did a course on how to write a briefing note, right?
Wow.
Because I know how important it is to be able to do that, right? So you have to like look for avenues to improve your skills if you want to become a policy analyst. And if you have somebody around you that you think can help you with that, you should as well talk to them and just get the relevant skills and you should be fine. Yeah,
so guys, last, seek help. That's a big one. So in case you are thinking of going out there and getting a job or anything, please do not forget to seek help. And guys, we will see you in another video. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click on the notification bell. That's very important, so you get notified whenever we have a new video on. And thank you so much. Thank you to our guest Larry for being on this series today. Thank you, and guys, we'll see you another time. Bye.